What's up, guys? Hope you're doing well. So yesterday I introduced this concept that I call the investor's approach, and today, as I promised, I'm going to introduce what I call the consumer's approach, which is one of the other three approaches that I think people are taking as it relates to sort of how they approach their life. I think it's the least ideal of the three. I think it's the most common in America, and I think it's the one that we're sort of indoctrinated with. I mean, if you think about it, for the last 50, 60, 70, maybe 80 years, consumerism has been pushed on Americans. It's been indoctrinated into us. You almost have to swim like a salmon against the current to not buy into this idea of a consumer's approach to your life. And so I want to caveat everything I'm about to say with, I'm not saying we can never be consumers or it's bad to be a consumer, because at times we all have to be, but it's not a great way to mark your life, right? And so that's really the purpose of sharing the consumer's approach, because I think it's a way people's lives are marked, and that's what's leading to the bad outcomes. So I'm going to give you 9 points of what I think makes up the consumer's approach. The first is people who buy into the consumer's approach, they think it's all about consumption versus creation. They're so focused on consuming what they want, on getting what they want, on having what they want, that they forget that most of the time getting what you want is about creation, right? And creation, like if you're thinking about your health, you're like, well, Zach, how does creation have anything to do with my health? Well, creation comes along with certain things, right? Like you have to think. You have to sow into something. You have to work or wait, right? It's not this thing that happens immediately. It takes effort. It takes trial and tribulation. It takes overcoming obstacles. And people who have a consumer mind, who are consumer minded, tend not to think about creation, about doing those things, because they're so focused on consuming what they want. So that kind of lays out the gist of what I think the consumer's approach is all about. It's this idea of I want what I want to consume it versus I want to create it. Number 2, the consumer's approach is primarily driven by feelings, right? You hear all the time in society today, it's happiness above all else. It's you deserve pleasure and you shouldn't have to endure pain. And you can see this in our culture. You can see this in people's lives. It's like the minute things get hard, they go, well, I don't know. I don't know if I really want it that bad. Or if it's hard, maybe I'm doing something wrong. They don't realize that, like, to get from the left side or the middle of the bell curve to the right side in any area of your life, like, it takes hard work. It takes enduring pain. It takes enduring some level of suffering and some level of in any more persecution, right? That's just part of what makes successful people successful. And so if we're taking this idea into our lives that if we're not happy, then something must be wrong, we're probably not going to end up where we want to go. So the third thing, which is it kind of dovetails onto the second thing, which is happiness doesn't come from giving, but it comes from getting, right? I can't be happy if I don't get, or if these things aren't done for me or done to me first, right? Like we allow our fulfillment. I think of it more in terms of fulfillment than happiness, because I think happiness is fleeting. But it's like people who have a consumer mindset, they literally think, if I'm not getting the things that I want, I can't give what other people want. It's so backwards, right? When the reality is, the Bible says it's better to give than to receive. It says that we should be cheerful givers. It says that we should be generous. It says that we should be serving. And so often I think the solution to our unfulfillment problems, our unhappiness problems, is like, we got to turn the mirror around. We got to actually go out to give, to serve, to create value. And in exchange for doing that, oftentimes, most times, what comes back is this love, this fulfillment, right? This happiness, this joy, this peace. And so I think consumer-minded people get that really wrong. The fourth thing is, you hear this all the time, it's my right. It's a human right. I deserve it. We're so focused on what we think we deserve anymore that we don't realize the only reason we have the luxury of thinking we deserve it is because somebody else worked their butts off and sacrificed and went through all the hard work to create it in the first place. In my mind, like, communism is really about consumption versus creation. That's why it always fails. Because at the end of the day, like, society, our lives individually don't get better if we're not focused on creating. If we're only focusing on what we want and how we don't have it, we become envious. And we talk a lot in America about greed, but we don't talk almost at all about envy. And if you ask me, our envy meter is even worse than our greed meter. And if people would just stop being envious and thinking they're always oppressed and realize that they can do something about their outcomes by actually focusing on giving, creating, serving, providing value, all of their outcomes, well, maybe not all, but a whole lot of their outcomes would change. Fifth thing, People who think like consumers, they always expect it to be easy, fast, and immediate. They think, hey, if this is hard, if I have to sacrifice, there's got to be something wrong. And that is what we're told, like everywhere today, is you should be able to get rich quick, you should be able to get fit quick, you should be able to take a pill, and all your health problems should go away. They never talk about the fact that, oh, maybe what you should do is just eat real food. And maybe what you should do is not eat fast food and not eat seed oils and not have blue light shining on your face at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? Because we've indoctrinated people into thinking that it should be easy, fast, simple. Somebody else should be doing the thinking. Somebody else should be doing the work, popping the pill, winning the lottery. And the reality is people who win in their life, people who succeed in their life, that is not how they're doing it. Almost ever. And the people who do get fortunate enough to do it that way never stay that way. That's why the Bible says riches gained quickly are fleeting. They flee, they leave. Okay, number 6. People always think life is a fixed pie and I got to get mine. Like how often do we hear in America, people need to pay their fair share or people need a bigger slice of the pie. Well, guess what? It's so off base because the pie isn't fixed. When you think specifically about the economy, right? It's not a fixed pie. The pie is always expanding if we're getting more productive, if we're getting more creative, if we're creating more value in the marketplace. Like every time somebody creates a product that people want, like let's say an iPhone, guess what? Then there's other people that can create products that you buy on your iPhone. It creates more pie by being creative and productive and creating value in the first place. And so, man, like people who think I got to get mine, I got to get a bigger piece of the bigger slice of the pie, they've missed the point. They're so focused on consumption, they don't realize that if I just create more, if I just serve, if I create value, like my slice of the pie, because the pie is getting bigger, my slice is going to get bigger. Okay, number 7. Investors talk all the time about capital allocation, right? How you allocate your money. I think as it applies to what I'm talking about, it's more than just capital allocation. It's about resource allocation, your time, your money, your mental capacity, right? Like maybe even the smiles that you have to give out. People who approach life like consumers, where their life is marked by consumerism, they allocate everything wrong because they allocate everything into getting or buying, right? Achieving it right now as opposed to sowing. That's the whole point of investing, right? We're sowing into something so that down the road, there's something bigger later on. People who are always consuming, they can't do that. It's like it doesn't register in their brain, and so they're just getting and getting and getting, and then they never have because they never sowed into anything that got bigger, that compounded, that took off because it compounded so great that you couldn't even control it anymore. And that's why the results in their life are not where they want them to be. Okay, next thing, I think this is number 8, self-serving. People with a consumer's approach, if you haven't already noticed, their mindset is that of self-service. And I like to put a picture to these approaches because for me, it makes it easier to remember and to relate to. At the end of the day, I think the picture of somebody with a consumer's approach at its worst, right? In the worst circumstance, at the very bottom of the barrel, would be a drug addict. Somebody who's so fixated on consuming that next thing because they think it's going to make them feel a certain way. And yet that very thing that's making them feel that way, that's causing them to be addicted to it, is literally ruining their lives. It's ruining their families, their health. It's ruining their faith if they have one. It's ruining their money. Like it literally ruins it all. And people who are constantly taking the consumer's approach, they're stuck in that mindset like an addict. And it just doesn't end well. It doesn't ever get them where they want to go. As a matter of fact, it always keeps them stuck on the far left side of that bell curve. So those are the ones I got. The last thing that I'm going to say, and I'll wrap this up, is we all have to be consumers at times, right? But we don't have to stay there. Like I think of it as a graduation, right? We all come out of the womb knowing how to consume. We don't have to stay there, right? We can go from consumption to creation. And when we go from consumption to creation, that's what God, like part of what he created us to do is to go be on this earth and create things. And primarily the way I think about it is creating value in other people's lives. Because if we create value in other people's lives, the net result most of the time is that value is going to be returned to us, right? It's like, what you reap, you will sow. And if what we're sowing, is self-service, we're going to reap like an addict. And if what we're sowing is service to others, man, we're going to reap like we couldn't imagine. So that's the consumer's approach. Tomorrow, I'll share with you the next approach, the saver's approach. Hope you liked it. Share any comments or thoughts you have down below. Thanks for watching.